Japanese demon charms, the use of paper and demons. I recently caused a lot of controversy in my video warning people not to buy any art from Christian, especially since his incarceration. I warned that curses, psychic energy, and demonic entities or low-level spirits can attach themselves to paper, and that essentially it is not worth the risk of bringing anything from that kind of environment Christian is in into your own home and life. Especially with my theory that he has demonic entities attached to him. I really wanted to warn people of the possible dangers involved. Well, I am not alone with the belief relating to paper. Before I go into Japanese demon charms, I have to go into the use of Katashiro, which is usually a traditional Japanese paper doll used in Shinto purification rituals to this very day. In Shinto, Katashiro no Hari, or cleansing with a purifying object shaped to resemble a human being, is a common practice. In Katashiro, the materials used for rendering the human form are steel, plants, tree bark, and clay, but most popular material is paper. The paper Katashiro is referred to as a Hitogata. Paper was introduced to Japan from China in the 700s. Paper was then used in many Shinto objects, like the gohei, or the gohai, which are wooden wands decorated with two shide, or zigzagging paper streamers. The gohai were a form of Yoroshiro, or the spiritual antenna by which the spirit of Kami can descend and manifest its presence. And Kami is a reference to Japanese gods in Shinto. They call them Kami. The Katashiro was treated as a substitute for an individual person. It was used as an object for prayer and sometimes even for a curse or sorcery. From the late 700s, it became a custom to seek purification, recovery from illness, or the elimination of misfortune by throwing a Hitogata, Japanese paper doll, into a river or burning it in a fire after it had absorbed all impurity, or to quote a Shinto priest, bad vibrations, which in context is usually a reference to psychic attack or low-level entities or demons. There was another style of purification with the Hitogata. Now this is very relevant to the demon charms, which I'll go into soon. This is where the Hitogata is wrapped in an additional sheet of white paper with a prayer written on it. After a certain number of days of prayer, the paper is burned. This method is known as the quote, charm of wishing prayer. To quote a Shinto priest, although people might consider these practices as superstitious, I have directly experienced these spiritual powers. Hitogata does possess the power to absorb bad vibrations. When, for instance, we burn the paper after having rubbed the affected part of a sick person with it, we find turbid black ash left over after the burning. Sometimes when preparing the Hitogata, it can even become tainted before it is used, because it has already attracted and absorbed the bad vibrations of the afflicted person for whom it has been made." End quote. Hitogata are also used in four corners of a room to protect the space against bad vibrations. It absorbs bad vibrations produced in a room where people are quarreling and other negative activities are going on. To quote the Shinto priest again, "Sometimes when these Hitogata are burned, the flame might turn into a poisonous green and the ashes are turbid black." End quote. Now I mention this, for this is a common Shinto religious practice used to this very day. And as I mentioned earlier, the paper Katashiro or Hitogata are also used for curses and sorcery. This is where the Japanese demon charms come in. Now that you understand the context and use of paper in Shinto, or at least very basic understanding, it will be easier to understand its use as a form of magic. The Japanese have an ideogram representing the word in English terms demon, or onai. It is used in a form of talisman on paper, where the ideogram is at the top, and then underneath there is specific instructions given by adding commands for the demon for all sorts of effects. From making someone fall in love with you using this demonic assistance, to cursing people or trying to kill them using the demon attached to the paper. Now, this may have originally come from Chinese esoteric Taoism, or Taoism, depending on which translation you prefer. For as I mentioned before, how paper came from China to Japan, for there are Chinese Taoist Fu sigils which look very similar in nature to these talismans. With regards to Japanese demon charms, there are very little information to be found on them, especially in English, so I cannot know for sure of the origin and exactly how they were used, but I believe strongly that they were probably used in a similar way that the Katashiro I mentioned earlier were used, and also I think they were used alongside the paper Katashiro or Hitogata. I speculate that one way the demon charms were probably used was in the same method I mentioned from the Shinto charm of wishing prayer, where the Hitogata is wrapped in an additional sheet of white paper with a prayer written on it. After a number of days of prayer, the paper is burned. I believe that the Hitogata was wrapped in a demon charm, then burned. The demon charm could also be put away or hidden after creation, placed on a shrine, or, for example, if you're trying to curse someone, hiding it in their house or within their property. I have no information for certain of how these were used, so I must speculate. And that is the reason I brought up the Hitogata. Now, the point I'm trying to illustrate is that I'm not the only person that believes in this stuff. My theories do not come out of nowhere. It does not matter if this is an antiquated practice regarding the demon charms, for the use of the Hitogata is still an important contemporary part of modern Shinto religious practice. The fact that it exists, and it has that much thought put around the creation and use of these paper dolls and talismans controlling demonic forces or archetypes, is reason enough to put some value in this transcendental belief. And the use of paper in contemporary practice has been something that can be either used to bring down the imagery of a kami or god, and also be used to draw in low-level entities and psychic energy, is not something as obscure as one might think, and it is still used to this day. It is also not only Japan that does this. It is very prominent in the Western esoteric tradition, especially with people utilizing the Goetia, or the lesser key of King Solomon, and the demonic sigils involved. The movie Hereditary shows some of this in the use of the demon from the Goetia called Paimon. Though it is very important to know that in that film, the people were not occultists, but they were a cult that was actually worshipping the demon Paimon as some kind of god, evoking him rather than conjuring him, like the methods of control used by occultists meddling with the Goetia. You treat demons like your servants. You command them, then send them away. This seems to be no different with regards to utilizing demons or onai in Japanese magic. Anyway, I just thought I'd illustrate a point about the universal nature of the demonic archetype and the association with demons being utilized through paper, given the synchronistic nature of me discovering these Japanese talismans at the time of making that video about Christian's paper artwork. I have not made this to defend myself regarding the Christian artwork. I just wanted to show that there is more to these theories than I usually go into. I hope people found this interesting. Now, with regards to my sources of information on Shinto practices, I got most of it from a book called The Essence of Shinto, Japan's Spiritual Heart, by Motohisa Yamakage. who is a prominent Shinto priest. Thank you.